Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to today's really special webinar in celebration of Black History Month. And this year's theme is Power in Our Purpose, Past, Present and Future. But before we dive in, I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. It's been a really well-populated webinar. So whether you're tuning in from your workplace, your home, office, or even perhaps catching up during your lunch break, your presence really matters because meaningful change begins with conversations like this one. So I want you to let us know in the chat where you're from, where you are today, where you're from, if you're from a company, if you're just what you're doing today. Please, let's get the chat buzzing. And for anybody that doesn't know me, I'm Paul Sesay. I'm the founder and CEO of Inclusive Companies, and it's an absolute honor to be here with you all this afternoon as we come together to celebrate and reflect, and most importantly, stand firm in our power and our pride, especially in today's climate. Now, before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. So please feel free to pop any questions or reflections into the chat throughout the session. I will endeavor to ask it to all the panelists that are here. If you need to take a break or step away from the screen, that's absolutely fine. This session is being recorded and it will be on our Inclusive Companies members afterwards and our YouTube as well. And finally, don't be shy about joining in the conversation. We'd love to hear your thoughts as we go along. You know, it's really important. So this year's national theme reminds us that our strength doesn't come from a single moment in time. It's built through generations of resilience, creativity, and courage. From the powerful legacies of those who came before us to the change makers shaping the present and the next generation building our shared future. Today, we are celebrating the unstoppable force of Black excellence. And I tell you what, this lineup we've got for you today is absolutely something special. I am not joking, you're in from such an amazing treat. So we'll be kicking off today with the inspiring keynote speech from Josh Preye Garry. He is a National Diversity Awards winning and award-winning historian, educator and author whose work has been transformed and how Black British history is taught and understood. We had him last year in London at an event we did there, and he brought some school kids from his school. He teaches English. Well, he did teach English at the school in London. And it was so thought-provoking, and it's a positive impact that Black people have within the world. So then we'll move on to what you know is an unforgettable panel, featuring myself alongside three powerhouse voices. Dr. Yvonne Thompson, a trailblazer, leader, advocate, and true advocate of change. Caroline Frankum, global CEO of Kantar, whose visionary leadership continues to transform industries and drive inclusion worldwide. And last but not least, Dawn Carter-McDonald, Chief Executive of Hackney Council, a phenomenal leader, redefining local government through equity and transformation. And together we'll be exploring how we honour the past, challenge the present, and shape the future where power and pride aren't just celebrated in October, but are actually embedded in every day, every decision, and every organisation. So let's get inspired, challenged, and energized, and let's celebrate history, honor Black excellence, and remember there is power in our purpose. And this is my absolute pleasure to hand it over to our keynote speaker to kick things off, the brilliant Josh Preye Garry. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul, for that introduction. Bear me one moment. Just going to share the slide, and then I want to take you through a whistle-stop tour of our presence in this country. Okay, just double checking. Can we all see the screen? Can we all see the presentation?
Yes, perfect.
Brilliant. So, Black history teaching, how we got here. My name is Josh Preye Garry. I'm a history teacher, head of department, senior leader, author and historian. And the key thing that I've been working on is ensuring that Black history remains British history, and making sure that that is a mainstay in the curriculum. So this Black Lives in Britain. So this PowerPoint presentation / lesson is going to take us through the presence of Black people in Britain, right the way from the African Romans to hopefully the present day. And it links in wonderfully with our theme, standing firm in power and pride, Black History Month. It's going to explore centuries of the Black presence, pride, and power in shaping the Britain that we live in today. Introduction. So this year's Black History theme, standing firm in power and pride, we are celebrating the achievement, resilience, contribution, and not just the survival of our of Black people in Britain. And the story of Black Britain is one of presence, power, and participation. The presence of Black people in Britain is continuous, whether you go at what we call the start of recorded history or right the way through till today. We have constantly been here. We've constantly contributed, and our presence and our power has played a key role in shaping Britain, the Britain we live in today. So just a general question which I like to ask. So when do you think the first Black person arrived in Britain? Just random guess, would you say it's A, the 16th century, West African traders, B, the 17th century during the transatlantic slave trade, or C, the 20th century during, in 1948 when the SS Windrush docked in Tilbury? Just in the chat, just put A, B, or C quickly. Let's just have a guess. Okay, well, let's find out. I'm going to explore the stories of these several individuals who are on my PowerPoint presentation. Cheddar Man, right way through to Claudia Jones, and I've even got a special shout out to Muhammad Ali, who visited my neck of the woods, Brixton, back in the 1970s. So meet Cheddar Man. Some of you may be asking me, who is Cheddar Man, and how on earth does Cheddar Man relate to our story of Black British history? Now, Cheddar Man, he is the oldest surviving complete human skeleton of a British person, and he was found over 10,000 years ago. Now, his name Cheddar Man derives from where he was located. He was discovered in Somerset Cheddar Gorge. But Cheddar Man is quite interesting because when you look at Cheddar Man, he immediately challenges our understanding of what it means to be British. First and foremost, he's a melanated Black man with blue eyes and long hair. And he is known as the first ever Briton. That's remarkable because what that shows is the presence of Black people in Britain has been there continuously. Now, his skeleton was uncovered in 1903 during the improvements to the drainage of a particular popular tourist site, Cheddar Gorge, which is located in Somerset. Now, when his skeleton was first discovered, not much was known about him beyond the fact that he was the oldest surviving person we've got to know. But through scientific technology, through the use of through analyzing his teeth and his bones and using DNA data, scientists have been able to recreate what Cheddar Man might have looked like. And this is a striking image we get. We get this image of a Black man with blue eyes and long hair, which completely challenges our conception or our misconception of what it means to be British. And to find out more about Cheddar Man, if you go to the Natural History Museum, there's a lot more on him. Now, why is this story so important? Well, it's very important. So he is just one person, but he is also indicative of a population of Europe at the time, says Dr. Tom Booth. At this time, they had dark skin, as we know, during Pangea, when all the continents were joined together. That process of migration from Africa to Europe, the people who were in Europe at this time had dark skin because they needed the melanin to protect them from the sun. But as a result of centuries of evolution, there was less need for the melanin to protect them from the heavy UV rays that you encounter in the continent of Africa. And then you those genetic mutations in skin, for example, in eyes and in hair color. But this is important because it reminds us that we can't make assumptions about what people look like in the past based off what people look like in the present. And that features aren't fixed. So when we say to ourselves, what does it mean to be British? What does it mean to be an Englishman? You'll find that quite often this is shifting, and we've got to be very careful because we cannot base that off what we see today. And that moves us to one of my favorite quotes, which I always like to point out. It's from Peter Fryer when he said there were Africans in Britain before the English came here. Now you're probably saying, what on earth does that mean? There were Africans in Britain before the English came. Now Peter Fryer had this assumption back in 1984 when he found skeletal remains in what is today York, and these skeletal remains, in particular the thighs, or the femur, should we say, were a lot larger than your average European. Now, when we say that there are Africans in Britain before the English came, for those of us who understand, the English arrived from what is modern day Germany, the Anglo-Saxons, the Jutes, Anglo-Saxons as we tend to call them. That is where the English came from. However, the Africans were a part of the Roman Empire, who arrived in roughly 43 AD after the invasion of Claudius. And during that time, I can't quantify how many Africans you had in Britain, but there are certainly a considerable number. There are certainly a number of Africans. For example, here you've got the famous Hadrian's Wall, which was built to protect the Romans from the Celtic invasions. And stationed on this, you had a division known as the Division of Moors, named after Marcus Aurelius. And they were stationed here. And these are examples of African Romans who are guarding the Roman Empire from the Celtic invasion. Right. And as I mentioned earlier, Fryer also noted that among the skeletons unearthed were several whose limb proportions suggested that they were African. Now, the issue is this was only a hunch or an assumption that Fryer had. He didn't have the scientific evidence to prove his hypothesis. But 30 years later, and thanks to forensic science, it was confirmed that his suspicion in the 1980s was in fact the reality. As a result of a process known as radioisotope analysis, the bones and teeth of these skeletons were analyzed, and it came back that a number of them did certainly derive from African origin. And one of the famous ones we have here is Ivory Bangle Lady. And I really enjoy sharing the story of Ivory Bangle Lady to my students, because what she immediately does is challenge the understanding or our perception of what Roman Britain would have looked like. Now, what we have with Ivory Bangle Lady is somebody of what you might term dual heritage. And one of her parents was from North Africa, but she grew up in a completely different part of the empire, which was modern day Britain in what is York. Now, her remains are quite interesting because from her remains we find that she was not an enslaved African. In fact, she was quite free. So there's a number of questions we have about Ivory Bangle Lady, and some of them are, Ivory Bangle Lady may have been born and brought up in the south of Britain or the continent of Europe rather than Africa. She was found in York. And some of the objects we found that are placed, which included bracelets made from local jet and more exotic ones made from ivory, which suggests that she was somebody who was actually of pretty high status. And a short inscription on a bone mount that once probably decorated her box suggests that this high status young woman was a Christian, as it says, "Hail sister, may you live in God." Now, my thoughts. Quite often people would ask, okay, so if there were Africans during the Roman period, what happened to them during the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages? The truth is, I don't really know. It can be tempting to say that all the Africans had left, or it might be, it might be tempting to say that there were a really, really small number. Unfortunately, evidence doesn't give us a conclusive answer here. However, Blackness may not simply be seen as a relevant point to some people, and that's why they weren't recorded. And we have very little evidence about any individual poor person living in the Middle Ages, really. Most of the people we know from the Middle Ages tend to be from the royal family. But you've got at the top here an image of Francis Barber, and you've got his great-great-great-great grandson, Cedric Barber. And what I believe may have happened was as a result of the integration between the Africans and all the black people and the white people. That integration meant that in some cases we may have had Africans who were hiding in plain sight, just as we have with Cedric Barber. You would never ever guess that Cedric Barber was in fact the great grandson of Francis Barber. And also, it's also important to consider that when the Romans had left, almost, a whole millennium had taken place when we got to the Dark Age. That's almost 1,000 years, which is an incredibly long amount of time. So, change in pigmentation and appearance is certainly something that could have taken place. So as I said, we don't know the answer for sure, but we do know that there were Africans in Britain before the English came. Moving on then, quite often we teach the Tudors in school, and the famous rhyme that comes to our head, divorced, beheaded and died, divorced, beheaded, survived. We usually think of Henry VIII and his 6 wives. He was quite an infamous figure, but that's not what I usually think about when I think of Tudor England. When I think of Tudor England, I think about the world expanding as a result of advancements in technology, developments of scientific knowledge, and just the thirst to explore. And that introduces us to some really, really key individuals in Tudor England who I really love sharing my students about. First one here being John Blank. Now, John Blank is the first African who we have a portrait of, but we also have we have a story behind John Blank. Now, John Blank, he was a royal trumpet player for both Henry VIII and Henry VII, and he could be found on the Westminster Roll. Now, John Blank's story is quite interesting because once again, it continues to challenge our understanding of blackness in the early modern period. John Blank, he realized that his fellow colleagues were earning, more money than him, and he wasn't too happy about this. So he wrote a petition to King Henry VIII asking for an increase in his salary. Hence the reason why we know about him. And I love, telling my students this story and finding out what they think would happen. I often get them to guess, and quite often they assume that Henry VIII rejects this request. But what actually happened, in fact, was he received the pay rise that he asked for. And in addition to this, when John Blank got married, Henry gave him a purple gown and a hat. This is important because it continues to challenge the idea that A, we weren't in Britain, but number two, that when we first arrived in Britain, we arrived in a subservient enslaved role. Of course, the transatlantic slave trade happened, and that was a significant part of world history, not just Black history, but our history stretches far, far beyond that. And John Blank's story is a good place to really, really disrupt that misconception. We also have, several other stories. So to drive home the fact that Africans weren't enslaved during the Tudor period, we have the famous story of Jack Francis. Now, Jack Francis was a deep sea diver, and he had to help Henry VIII salvage some of his materials when the Mary Rose sank. But after being, employed for this role, Jack Francis was asked to give testimony at court, which he gave. Now, the significance of him being able to give testimony is that if you're enslaved, you could not give a testimony because ultimately you were somebody's property. So the fact that Jack Francis was able to give a testimony at court further drives home the fact that Africans who arrived in Tudor England were not enslaved. They were free. And they lived pretty ordinary lives like the majority of people in England. Most people in England were peasants, were poor, and they worked in agriculture, just like everyone else. They were able to get married, they were able to get baptized, and they were able to get buried. They were accepted into the Christian fabric of the country, which for some suggests that they were accepted. And it suggests that religion at this time was far more a significant indicator of difference as opposed to skin color. And then here you have the famous Drake jewel. So this jewel was handed to Sir Francis Drake, who some people call a privateer. call him a pirate personally. But it was during his plundering of the Spanish ships in Nombre de Dios in Panama. But here you have the union between the Cimarrones and the English naval fleet, and that's where both the Cimarrones, the formerly enslaved Africans who were able to gain freedom in Panama, worked together to help plunder the Spanish ships. And now we're moving into the early modern period, and I had to put this shameless plug. As you can see at the bottom here, I'm a big fan of boxing myself, but then you have the really, really famous story of Bill Richmond. Now, Bill Richmond came to Britain as a servant when he was 14 years old. And Richmond trained as a boxer and established a solid career for himself. He married an Englishwoman and had several children. Now, Richmond's story poses interesting questions to us regarding race and how far sports allow Black people to be accepted. But I would argue that sports have been one field in which Black people have very much thrived and has very much, through that contribution, been able to stand in power. And, you know, Bill Richmond was very much an inspiration for me when I decided to have a short and I would say successful career in amateur boxing. And then we have Sarah Forbes-Burnett as well. Now, Sarah Forbes-Burnett, this is a photograph of her with James Davies. And she was actually the goddaughter of Queen Victoria. Now, she was brought here. Sarah Forbes-Burnett was captured in a war as an infant, and she was presented to a British naval officer by King Gizo of Dahomey as a gift to Queen Victoria. But when she came, she was adopted as Queen Victoria's goddaughter, and she grew up in English society. Now, little is known about what her life was like when she was raised in England. But once again, we have a very interesting story of somebody who became the goddaughter of Queen Victoria, one of the most successful monarchs in British history. And William Cuffey. So William Cuffey was born in Kent, but he was from Kennington, South London. I always shamelessly plug South London where I can. And he was part of the infamous Chartist movement. Now, the Chartist movement played a pivotal role in British history, because what the Chartist movement did is they petitioned for democracy. After the Peterloo massacre, the government officials were very, very suspicious of mass protests and mass petitions, but quite often the laws that are passed in Parliament are often laws that were in the interest of the ruling elite. William Cuffey was amongst those who petitioned for the working class male to gain a vote. And whilst it didn't necessarily happen in his lifetime, he was arrested and deported to Tasmania. We are able now to benefit from those fruits of democracy, the seeds in which William Cuffey sowed. So we can continue to see how the Black presence and Black contribution has been in British history throughout. And here you've got a really, really interesting story of Walter Toll. Now, Walter Toll had a fascinating life and a fascinating career. He was orphaned at quite a young age, and he went on to famously play for Tottenham Hotspurs, and then he fought for Britain in the First World War. And he was quite a distinguished soldier. He experienced some challenges himself, such as racism, but he actually was able to lead an expedition, and that just shows how remarkable and extraordinary Walter Toll was, because it was quite rare for you to have a Black person leading expeditions. And he had several expeditions that he successfully led before he was fatally killed, should we say, during World War One. Now, a lot has gone back and forth about this, but to my knowledge, he wasn't awarded a Victoria Cross for his bravery, and that's something that I often get my students to petition. You can correct me if I'm wrong with this, because I have heard from people that he has since been recognized, but as of when I made this slide, he hadn't quite been recognized for his major contribution. And if we think about the significance of the First World War and the importance of the First World War for the free world, Walter Toll and the Black presence was quite important in helping us achieve that. And soldiers from the Empire as well. And this is something I've always found quite interesting. When we think about the First World War, many, very few of us actually understand that or actually know that the first ever bullet to be fired for Britain was fired by this man here, Alhanji Grunji, who was from the Gold Coast Regiment. And what that continues to show is how important the Black presence has been. And soon after the war started, you had soldiers from all over the empire. You had soldiers from Nigeria, the Gambia, Rhodesia, which is now modern-day Zimbabwe, South Africa, Sierra Leone, Uganda, modern-day Malawi, Kenya, and what is now the Gold Coast. And they were patriotic and they traveled to the motherland, paying their own expenses to fight against the Germans, right? So in this atmosphere, well, quite a lot is said about migration and quite a lot is said about the contribution of migrants and patriotism. Is very, very important. Very, very important for us to remember that during the significant moments of British history, we have always been there and migrants have always been there, playing a vital role. And then here, I really love this image. This is John Smythe from Sierra Leone, and he was a Black RAF pilot. And his story is quite interesting. He was, during one of his expeditions, he was actually shot down. And I believe when he was shot down, he landed in Germany, and he was a Black man of 6 foot plus. So for him, it made no sense of him trying to run away because he was going to be easily recognizable. But he was incredibly successful, and he was one of the people who had one of the best shots during the RAF campaign. And the Black RAF fighters were able to overcome the legacy of the official color bar to serve in the skies over Europe as pilots, navigators, flight engineers, and gunners. And these men were pioneers in the most truest sense. And the greatest, once again, you've probably heard quite a bit about me from Brixton, but this is a shameless plug. This is when Muhammad Ali, he visited Tulse Hill Boys Comprehensive School in 1974. And he came not as a boxer, but a symbol of Black excellence and empowerment. And his message inspired teachers to launch one of Britain's first Black history courses, showing students that their histories and their stories mattered. For many, that day was more than a visit. It was a spiritual awakening, a reminder that greatness could be homegrown. And you just got this image here of Ali with a student who's trying to mimic the Ali shuffle. So some of my closing reflections. Black lives have shaped Britain's story in art, politics, faith, and resistance. To stand firm in power and pride is to honor the past and shape the future. Black history is not a month. It's the foundation of our shared story. And then here you just got the image of a Black boy during the evacuations. Now, in order to help me put this together, I used a number of books such as Black and British, Me and White Supremacy, Why I No Longer Speak to White People About Race, and you've also got the Black Cultural Archives in Brixton, as well as Small Axe. These are a number of places where you can find out more about some of the stories that I shared, and those stories aren't exhaustive. There's plenty more stories that could be shared, but due to timing, I just decided to choose a small number of those stories throughout. And please give me a follow on Twitter. I'm at Josh Preye Garry. On Instagram, I'm at Josh Preye Garry, and LinkedIn will just be my name. Thank you, and I hope you learned something from that.
Thank you, Josh. That was absolutely phenomenal. I just want to understand what made you get into teaching history within schools, because I think that's an important question, because every time I spoke to you, you spoke with such passion, with such eloquence. Is obviously you really want to sit there and encourage the kids to know about history, not just Black kids, but people across the UK. And I've learned so much about Black history through yourself. What drives you to do this?
Oh man, there's a few things really. I think it's quite funny. When I was doing my teacher training, I think back in like 2013, I struggled quite a bit. But the one session that I really came to life to, and I really resonated with, was the session in our training session on Black history. And I've always had a bittersweet relationship with history in that I love history. I've always loved history when I was a youngster. But when I was growing up, the only history that we ever encountered was the transatlantic slavery. or transatlantic slave trade. So I didn't know about John Black. I didn't know about any of these other really, really key individuals. And I just said to myself that if I can, I don't want any student who is studying history to encounter what I encountered when I was younger. And then B, I also wanted to make sure that this history was shared. It's not just for Black people, it's for Britain. I think politicians conveniently ignore these contributions, and they conveniently tell a version of history. And I just wanted to make sure that that alternative could be shared, so that people like myself, people like yourself, can know that we belong to Britain, and just be proud of being British. So yeah, I guess that's it.
And why do you think it's not mainstream in schools? And how do we make it so?
So to be fair, I would challenge that. So here's the textbook. It's a lot more mainstream than it used to be. So like, for example, all the major exam boards, GCSE exam boards, have a major unit on Black British history. And they are in the pipeline, or they are in the works of doing more. But a lot of it's really down to region and teacher preference, because what you have, teachers, for want of a better word, are experts. So when they're choosing GCSE courses, they're going to tend to choose the courses that they study. Nazi Germany, for example, Queen Elizabeth. And for some teachers, it's quite challenging because their subject knowledge in these areas aren't as strong. So I think one of the things might be teacher subject knowledge, although I think that's improved. And I think also regions. I think regions play a big part, because often as a teacher, you tend to choose histories that you think will either speak to your students or at the very least challenge what they know. So in London, for example, there's been a massive shift and more work's happening. But I think, to summarize my answer, the two key things: teacher knowledge, resources, and time, but also region. I think those things play a part.
And last question, because it happens in my kids' school, and it was the book Mice and Men, where obviously they have the N-word in that. It's still taught in British schools. Why? And what do you agree with that?
You got Michael Gove to blame for that. I think that's the easiest answer. And no, well, I think that there are so many more empowering stories and so many other kind of forms of literature that can be taught. And Mice and Men, it's based in the United States of America anyway, which is important, but we have our own story, and there's so many different stories that I think teachers can use. So I may get in a bit of trouble for this, but I just think teachers need to not be lazy and look up those other stories to tell. But I think, to be fair to teachers, when you've still got the curriculum that was written by Michael Gove in 2014, in some places, there is restriction. But no, Mice and Men, I don't think should be taught. I think there are plenty of other stories and literature and authors that teachers can use.
And sorry, I've got one more, because Hannah just put a sneaky question in there, and I just want you to answer it before we move on to the next section. But are there any resources recommended for stories like this about just Black British women?
Oh, good question. Good question. So, to be fair, I've got to apologize. There are, even from the resources I have, there are so many stories on Black British women. I'm not sure if there's anything on just Black British women, but there's certainly a lot of Black female voices and Black female stories out there that have been told. So I was going to include, for example, Olive Morris from Brixton, Claudia Jones. There's a lot on the contribution of Black females. This, because of the nature and how limited this presentation was, I couldn't cover that, but I think that's certainly something that in the future I'm going to try and create.
Yeah, one of the trailblazers for me is Diane Abbott. I think she's been a phenomenal and vindicated woman in politics that has done so much and been one of the first black politicians, you know, to be mainstream. And she has such a hard time. So, yeah. So thank you, Josh. Please, everybody, show some love for Josh. I want the love hearts. I want the claps. I want everything on this screen today. So show some love for Josh.
Thank you.
Absolutely amazing. Honestly, phenomenal. And yeah, you're going to be joining us for the next session anyway, Josh. So I think you need to stay on. But and I just want to thank you all as well. I've been looking at the chat. There's people from all over the UK, from Merseyside, Wirral to London, Manchester, Nottingham, Scotland, everywhere else. It's absolutely phenomenal. So thank you for attending today in this important webinar. But next we've got a phenomenal panel. Who I admire them all, and a lot of them have helped me along the way. My story is I was fostered and basically didn't have many parents, and well, I didn't have any parents, and you know, people that believed in me, and some of the people on this panel absolutely helped me with my career. And it just goes to show people like Josh and the people that we're going to introduce now are absolutely inspirational into leading people like me to believe in themselves, to achieve such amazing things. So if we could have the panelists to actually show up, that would be great. Could you turn your cameras on? I think they're on. I'm not sure. There we go. We've got Dawn, we've got Caroline. How are you doing? We did have Yvonne. I'm not sure if Yvonne was able to make us, but I'm sure she will if she's able to. So first of all, we're going to talk about, you know, obviously Black Britain, you know, past, present and future, which I think is really, really important. And but before we do that, I would just like the other panelists to introduce themselves and what their kind of role is within their organisation. So we'll start with Caroline.
Well, first of all, thank you, Josh. I learned so much. It was a fascinating story, and I'd love to. Lots of people are asking for a copy. I'd love that as well, please. But I'm Caroline. I am a global CEO in the corporate world. I've been doing that for about 13 years, most recently at Kantar. But I'm also a very passionate advocate and ally for DE&I.
And Dawn?
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dawn Carter-McDonald, and I'm the Chief Executive at Hackney Council. So really pleased to be here today, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Let me just get my questions up first and foremost. Well,
Hi,
when we
Paul,
can you hear me?
I'm here.
Oh, are you here, Yvonne? Okay, good.
You've been missing me all this time. What's going on?
I don't know. There you go.
I am here. I am here. And I also want to say thank you so much, Josh. That was just a whirlwind whole lesson on lots of things that we should know about the Black community. There's quite a few things that I did already know, but there's lots that I didn't. Just so you know, I was the chair for the African Caribbean War Memorial, so I know the story about the first shot in the second, I'm going to get this wrong now, Second World War being, First World War being shot by an African somewhere in Africa. So that was it. And I was also chair for the Black Cultural Archives. So I've had a lot. Yeah. I'm still very much involved with the War Memorial because it's something that we really need to know about, a huge part of Black history. And yeah, there we are.
Yvonne, and you undersell yourself because you were the person that started Choice FM as well.
Well, I knew you were going to do that for me, so thank you. Now, I have 40 years of running my own business. I've been an entrepreneur for 40 years. I started the first, or part of a group that started the first Black-owned radio station, started the first Black-owned PR company in the UK, started the first Black Women in Business network in Europe. And that's nearly 30 years ago. So long, yeah, here we are. Lots of experience to share.
Black royalty, and that's why I say thank you, Yvonne, and thank you for joining us. Don't know how we missed you. You just didn't come up on the actual screen then, but we're here now, which I'm absolutely made up. So with the first question, which we're going to ask is, over the last 10 years, I've seen a big shift, but how far have we come over the last decade? And I'm going to put that one to Dawn first, if that's okay.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much, and thank you, Yvonne. It's lovely to meet you today. I just have to quickly say before I answer the question, you know, we grew up listening to Choice FM. Oh my goodness! So yeah, so definitely. But to answer the question, wow, that's such a loaded question, a very deep question. You know, if we look at the political landscape that we're in now, for many people, well, for all of us, I think it's a challenging political landscape because it goes to the heart of community cohesion. It goes to the heart of us living together. And when we think about Josh's presentation and the fact that Black communities, Black people have been in the UK and can be recorded as far back as he has shown and demonstrated today, the political landscape that we see is really quite worrying and very distressing. You know, I'm a proud Hackney resident, so a proud Hackney, born in Hackney, I should say. I don't live in Hackney anymore, but really proud to be born in East London. So, and what I would say, being the chief executive now of this borough, it's really an interesting and a great place to work because it's a melting pot of so many different nationalities, different communities. Hackney is a really diverse borough. We've got 89 different languages spoken. And so the rise in what we see as, which has been kind of termed as far-right politics, the far-right politics in British politics is really very concerning, as I said, and something that has to be challenged on a daily basis. It's not something that we can accept, and it's not something that we should accept either. So as I said, I was born in Hackney, I grew up in Hackney, then we moved to North London, to Tottenham. I'm showing my age a bit here, but, you know, we would, myself and my brother coming home from school, often met on the corner by skinheads and by, you know, those types of groups that would want to chase Black children. And my dad was always someone who would meet us at the top of the road and then we'd end up chasing them. But I say all of that to say that, you know, we can't, the political landscape as it is has to be challenged. We can't accept it. We can't accept the fact that Black and global majority people, if you want to call us immigrants or whoever it is or whatever the terminology, that we haven't made a significant contribution to this society. And even today, as I was coming in on the train to work today, I met a lady and she was just saying to me, you know, imagine if we were all to stop working today. Imagine if every person who is being termed as an immigrant was not to turn up to work today, the whole country would stop. You know, our hospitals wouldn't be able to perform, our buses and trains wouldn't be able to run, because we make a significant contribution to this society, and sometimes it's not celebrated, it's not taught, it's not learnt as much as it should. So the question being, what does the political landscape look for myself as a leader, as somebody who works in local government? It's hard, but it's not impossible to challenge it. And every day we're challenging it, because every day, you know, I'm having the conversations with my staff, with the people that I work with local industry, even with the police, challenging the stereotypes that are being put out there about, you know, Black people in this country, and also immigrants in this country, and also people from Black and global majority. It's not a great thing, but we have to challenge it, and I believe that those of us in leadership are.
But obviously, you in the public sector, that it's such a difficult thing because you've got people from every aspect of society in Hackney. So how do you manage that though? You know, because you've obviously got to try and keep everybody happy, as it were. You know, how do you manage that?
And to be honest with you, you know, it's something I struggle with, because you know, you can never ever keep everybody happy. But for me, I think the focus has to be that everyone should feel heard, everyone should feel seen, and everyone should know that they belong. Because no one should feel that they don't have a sense, no one should have that sense of not belonging. And I think if we're able to create that a real community cohesion, which is based on a sense of belonging, a sense of, you know, people know that they contribute, and they contribute every day, just in terms of being in the United Kingdom, then that should be the start. So for myself as a chief executive, I'm constantly drawing on those different resources that we have to ensure that we're speaking about the council being an anti-racist council. We don't just celebrate Black History Month in Hackney. We introduced this 3 years ago. We have Black History Season. So throughout the year, we have a number of different programs, because we want to go right through the whole year celebrating Black history. You know, also the Windrush. I'm really proud to be the child of our parents who came to the UK as part of the Windrush generation. So we celebrate the Windrush Day and beyond, making sure that we're hearing from the voices of our elders, making sure that young people, although we don't have a Josh, I don't think, in any of our schools, we need to kind of clone him, I think, but we have, you know, young leaders in Hackney who are really doing their best to ensure that we can make Hackney and then London and then the UK a place where everyone feels that they belong.
Yeah, exactly, and that's well, everybody feels safe and everybody feels that they belong, because we contribute so much. You kind of answered two questions in first, because the first question was how far have we come, but then I think you went into the second question. But we'll go into the first question, was how far do you think we've come? And I think one lady in particular that I've got a lot of respect for, who's helped me tremendously as an ally, is Caroline. And I know within your own business, you've absolutely championed so many people from Black backgrounds in the organisation. How far do you think we've come?
Well, we've definitely made progress. A really sobering point in the corporate world was, of course, the terrible atrocities committed against George Floyd. And that was a real wake-up call for the corporate world in terms of ensuring that we were much more representative in our cultures and our behaviours. But I do feel, I'm going to kind of answer two questions in one, as follow Dawn's lead. I do feel that right now the political landscape is making progress uneven and quite fragile. So I don't want to deny we've made progress, but I think we need to be very conscious that there is a lot of work to be done to make sure that progress continues at a sustainable momentum and an improved momentum. Because in the corporate world, we're experiencing a much more hostile landscape where DE&I is questioned and challenged much more frequently, depending on your geographical location, of course, your institutional context and your political alignment. However, we're experiencing in the corporate world a range from regulatory and exec pushback, particularly in the US. I know we're focusing on the UK today, but we shouldn't ignore what's going on in the US, to withdrawal, rebranding, or quiet scaling down by private and corporate organizations, which is heartbreaking, actually, given the progress we have made. And that's particularly prevalent in sectors like tech, academia, social justice, and NGO. So there has been progress made, but we need to be very mindful that things are very fragile right now because of the political environment. And
I'm going to thank you. I think it's very eloquently put, and it is quite. Can I just ask a question for everybody out there? How many are feeling under pressure right now because of the current landscape? You know, fear of the future. Can you ask if you feel yes? Could you just put a yes? I feel a bit of fear. If no, then put no. I'd be interested to see. And the next question would be why, if that's okay, because a lot of yeses, can't see any nos, which is quite what I've been hearing throughout the communities across the UK. But why then? I would love to answer, why. Particularly worried about the future of our children, absolutely. Political landscape, and we've been here before, and we will overcome all of that. And I feel white people will challenge my presence. So there's a lot in there. So and we'll save this chat actually because I think it's very interesting. So I'm going to do the same question to Yvonne, because Yvonne, you've done so much and you've challenged so many stereotypes throughout your life, including, with the first start of radio station, all that kind of thing. So you've been through it and seen it all. How far have we come?
Well, I think, like most of the others have said, we've come a long way, but I think there's still a long way for us to go. It's exhausting, you know, when you've been doing it for 40 years like I have, it's exhausting. You know, we talk about Black History Month as though we're only Black once a year, you know. As far as I'm concerned, I wake up Black every morning, and I know it, and I feel it when I go out on the road, or, you know, whatever it is I'm doing. It's a shame. I think it was Lord Ouseley, when he was chair of, bless his soul, he's passed now, but he did say that he was chair of the CRE, the Commission for Racial Equality, which changed to CHR or something else.
Yeah.
And he did say, I think I asked him once, how will he know when he's achieved his job? And he said he would feel that he's achieved his job when there was no job for him to do. So in other words, you know, when we are all equal, when we all feel equal, when we all feel that we belong, you know, that's what we've been talking about. But there seems to be the wave of going forward, you know, 3 steps forward and 6 steps back. And that happens over and I mean, look at the whole George Floyd thing. We were all elated. We thought, at long last, you know, something is happening. Something is happening. But look at where we are now. That lasted. I remember at the time as chair for the Radio Academy. And when I joined the Radio Academy, which is a charity that looks after all the radio stations, when I became chair, my maiden speech was diversify or die. So the radio had to diversify or die, and it went down like a lead brick. I thought, oh my God, what have I done? What have I said? But within 6 months of that, I think 9 months at the most, George Floyd happened, and everybody was, oh, what can we do, Yvonne? Where, you know, where, what, how, why, when? And we did do some things, myself and Trevor Nelson and some of the other DJs, the high profile DJs came on, and we did webinars and all sorts of coaching sessions. But to me, even at that point, that didn't last very long. I didn't feel that lasted very long. And I remember one of my sayings during that time was, yes, it's today's news, but it's going to be tomorrow's fish and chips papers. And that's, again, you know, that happened in no time, because here we are trying to repair or get back to where we were as far as corporates are concerned, get back to where we were during that time. You know, I think one of the biggest mistakes were the corporates kind of almost overreached and tried too hard, because they were suddenly employing people as head of diversity who didn't necessarily have the qualifications. It was a tick box exercise. And I think that was a huge mistake, because it just didn't work. And we're right back. We didn't have the backup, and we're right back where we started.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Yvonne. I think George Floyd was one of the biggest shifts in towards not just Black inclusion, but diversity as a whole. He's running the business, you know, that I run. I think I've never seen so many organizations really want to engage with that. And then maybe did it go too far to the left as well? Maybe that's why the pushback was there as well. You know, maybe that, and there needed to be a spring back. I've heard that a lot as well. But you know, I'm going to go to you, Josh, now. But I've seen a massive, you know, just to see people like yourself and Dawn in senior positions is a testament to how far we've come. But we've got to keep it there. But yeah, Josh.
Yeah, no, I definitely echo the views of Dawn, Caroline, and Yvonne. I think for me, the political landscape feels both challenging and full of opportunity. As somebody working in like education and leadership, I see like a growing tension between progressive aspirations for inclusion. We certainly spoke to some of the students who I taught, there's a greater awareness that what is happening is wrong. I remember, we had a G on the last GCSE paper. It was a 16-year-old white Spanish student. She answered the question on how on how African tutors were taught, and she said, treated, sorry, and she said, African tutors, they came, they weren't enslaved, and they were treated well. Right now, this is a 16-year-old girl who would not know any of this kind of stuff, and she's going to go on to know more and more about this. So in that respect, it's clearly it's in education in a much better way than it once was, and it's touching the lives of people that probably wouldn't have known about that, right? But then when you look at the shift and you start to look at people's lived experiences, that's where the real challenge really presents itself. Looking at, for example, Black women in maternity, for example, they are far more likely to have miscarriages and stillbirths in comparison to the white female counterparts. And so you need to ask yourself, how are these systemic issues being solved? So there's definitely, and whilst there certainly is an increase with the rhetoric of the far right, which, to be honest with you, if you look at history, to me, that's just a byproduct of tough economic times. When this country goes through challenging times economically, they always find a scapegoat. That's nothing new. They've been doing it forever. You look back, for example, to the massacre in, I think, 1077, the St. Brice. Basically, the Anglo-Saxons, they killed and attacked the Vikings because stuff was hard. They found migrants to blame. But what I am positive about is a lot more people are growing up with the awareness that what the far right are saying isn't accurate, isn't a true depiction. And I don't think the young people are going to allow Britain to completely silence those conversations. But I do think that when looking at the lived experiences of people from our communities, I think that it will reveal that indeed minority groups still have a long way to go. And for me, like, the political landscape is not just about government or policy, but it's also a part of culture within organizations. And as Yvonne said, diversity, inclusion, and diversity, equity, and inclusion was very much a tick box exercise, which, because of some of the rhetoric of Trump, people are, trying to just throw underneath the carpet. But we can't allow that to happen. There needs to, we need to think about, okay, so who has power, whose voices are valued, and who feels empowered to challenge the norms. And I think that as a country, those are the things that we've got to be doing, making sure that the lived experiences of people from these groups are changing, because I don't think those are changing as quickly as they need to be. But also making sure that those voices who are challenging these issues aren't silent. So I guess to summarize my point of view, I think that the political landscape is definitely challenging, and it definitely does appear like it's going backwards. But if I know anything about the resilience of people in this country, they're going to continue to fight. When the Windrush arrived in 1948, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish, and the whole Notting Hill uprising was aimed at getting those people to go back. They didn't, and I believe that we will continue to fight. That's my answer, really.
Yeah, I'm just going to go through a couple of comments on. Thank you, Josh. Thanks for that great reply. But I'm just going to go through some of the comments because it's quite sad in a way. I grew up in East London in the 1970s when the National Front had marches through East London and received abuse because of my heritage. And I feel this country has gone backwards, and I feel it has gone back to the 1970s and 80s. Do you feel that out there? I don't know if that's how you feel. And when it comes to all the flags being put up across the UK, the English flags and the United Kingdom flags, do you think this is an attack on specifically people of colour, black people, or do you think this is an attack on the wider diversity of people? And I'd probably ask that to Yvonne.
I think it's a wider issue. Like Josh has said, everybody right now, they're just feeling, I think, the English are feeling invaded. I think, you know, the whole boat situation from France has really highlighted some not great stories, which just it's just exactly what is required to feed, you know, the discrimination, to feed the antisocial behavior, to feed them going up, putting all these St. George's flags up. I think, and again, like Josh says, when the economy is good, everybody's got a job, everybody's feeling happy, nobody tends to, we don't have all these issues. So I think one of the things is the economy, and the fact that every single day on the news, you get another report about how many people are coming in on how many boats, and, you know, all of that situation. And what makes it worse, you know, there will be one or two bad characters that come over on those boats. There will be one or two who go ahead and, you know, gets into trouble with the local neighborhood young ladies. There will be one or two who end up, you know, breaking into houses because they feel whatever.
Yeah.
But it's only one or two. But the way it's reported, it just feels like everybody that comes over on a boat shouldn't be here. And it sounds like they're making everything so much worse. So for me, I think, oh gosh, it is just a hard, tough time to live through. I think we will get through it, and there will be better times. But right now, to be honest, I live in the heart of Brixton. I'm just down the road from you, Josh, if you live in Kennington. And Brixton has gone, it's kind of followed the way of Harlem. First of all, it was nobody wanted to come here. And right now, it's what they might call back in the 80s yuppies. So everything has been regenerated. Everything has been, the prices now, I could never afford to live here if I didn't already live here.
Yeah.
But I still feel the tension. I do.
Yeah. So and can I ask a question to the audience as well? So obviously we see lots of flags being put up. Do you feel it's about of national pride, or do you think there is a deeper connotation in there? I just like, because I've never had this many people that I could ask this question to. How do you feel about the flags being put up across the UK? I would love to know your comments in the chat if you could. And also, if you've got any questions for the panel, which we've only got a couple of questions left, if you could put them on the Q&A so I could easily decipher them, that would be great. But yeah, if you could answer how you feel about the flags being put up across the UK. And whilst we're answering that question, Josh, can you answer that question as well about the diversity of the current climate? Is it aimed at more diverse people, not just Black?
Oh, I think what I've kind of seen, or my understanding of history, is it usually starts somewhere, but it progresses to other groups. Does that make sense? So, and I can't quite remember the quote, but you know, it starts off with those migrants on boats, right? Then it goes to Islamophobia or the Muslims. Then it goes to the Jews. Then it goes to blacks. And so, whilst at this current point, if I don't know any of them, but I guess if you were to speak to them, they'd probably say that it's directed at those guys coming on the boats. And, you know, I don't mean that, but that's what they'd probably say. But I think that as time goes on, it will move on to the other group, because at the heart of it are two things, right? Difference, and believing that the United Kingdom was some sort of a white monolith, which it never was. Everyone is a migrant to this country, depending on how far back you go. So I think that's the first thing. And then I think the second thing to it, not only do I think that it's an attack on the migrant group, but I also think it's, to my initial point, it's deep rooted in a fear for their current position. So I don't necessarily, I don't think it ends at the migrant group. I think a bigot doesn't view things as inclusive. For them, difference is difference. And so right now it's easy to target the migrant groups on the boats, but I think in time it progresses to other groups. And I can't remember, there's a famous quote, but it's almost like there's this poem I used to do in English where it'd say, not my business, where, they knock at one person's door, it's not us, so you leave it, then they'll knock, and eventually it comes to you. So at the moment it starts at the migrant groups, but I don't think it ends there. I think it's this deeper.
Yeah, I think the quote is I want to say Robert Mueller, where he says, first they came for the trade. Yeah.
That's the one.
You know the one? Yeah.
If someone's got it on their chat, please put it on there. That would be good.
Yeah, I mean, basically, first they came for the trade unionists and I didn't speak up.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't my business. And they came for the Catholics and I didn't speak up because it wasn't my business.
Yeah.
And they came for the Jews, wasn't my business. And then they came for me and there was no one left to speak up for me. That's one of the quotes. But I just wanted to go back a bit because I think the
if you could do it quickly, Yvonne, because I've got to move on. Sorry, to the next question. But there goes. Someone pulled it up. I think we have to take into account the fact of the saying that when America sneezes, we catch the cold. But if you remember, not too long ago, Trump was sending out the police to, quell all the riots and things, and no, he wasn't. He was encouraged them. No, he wasn't. I can't remember which way. But basically, there was a lot of rioting, and I think it just kind of followed onto the UK. Yeah, we're very influenced by that. So, but we have a lot of allies as well. I think when the Southport murders was done, and there was a lot of racist riots. I was encouraged at some point with the amount of anti-racist people that did come out and support as well. I think that it's been silenced by social media, the left, or or people having a different opinion to what is the narrative at the moment. But I do encourage that. There's a lot of people out there that still have a voice and still are allies, and that goes on nicely onto my next question of allyship and what does allyship look like, and how can we, how can allies, make a better future for people from not just from Black, but specifically Black for today, but for diverse people as well. I'm going to aim that at yourself, Caroline.
Well, first of all, I believe that as a leader, you don't have an option to opt out of being an ally. It's part of what you are meant to do as a leader. You have a responsibility to build cultures where people feel safe and bring their whole selves to whatever you're doing. At Kantar, we have 26,000 people in 100 markets all over the world. So the intersections and the diversity that we support is wonderful. And learning from that experience, we are better when we're working together and we're aligned around purpose, values, and driving growth. And to talk to Josh's point, you can't deny the data either. I feel a lot of this is driven by the state of living for everyone right now. But the data tells us, and this is from people like Harvard Business School and Deloitte, so trusted data experts, inclusive cultures are 6 times more likely to be innovative and agile, 2 times more likely to exceed financial targets. And diverse management teams are 70% more likely to capture new markets. So if we want growth, we've got to be all in together and work together. But for me personally, and my experience of being an ally and a leader, allyship means listening and learning deeply, creating safe spaces for honesty, challenging stigma, even when it's really uncomfortable, and showing up, not just in times of crisis, but every single day.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for being an ally for me as well, Caroline. So you don't just talk it, you actually do it. So, round of applause for Caroline, I think, out there. Just going back to the stats for immigrants coming on, immigration on boats. I did see the other day on news that actually the amount of people that come in on boats, for whatever reason, is only 3%. most people that come over to the UK for immigration is through student visas, and it was like by 60% are coming over on student visas, not by across the Calais. So it's interesting to know that it's literally only 3%. So when people are waving their flag saying, we don't want immigrants to come over, it's literally a small minority. A lot of them are coming over legally, which is it's interesting to know. Dawn, same question to you as allyship, because obviously you have lots of constituents, and you have to be an ally to lots. So same question to you about allyship.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with what Caroline has said. I think she's spot on in what she said. In many ways, we're all allies. But the fact is, we've got to recognise that we have a part to play in it. I think if we think about just this whole concept of I'm okay, so I don't need to worry about the next person around me, then that's what causes greater division and greater, lack of unity across society. For those of us as leaders and in positions of and being able to influence, we've got to call each other out as well and hold each other accountable in respect of what we're doing around allyship. So, I really believe I have a position in terms of I've got the local borough commander on the telephone. I can call her and I can speak to her at the drop of a penny, as it were. So what am I doing in terms of my responsibility as a chief executive of such a diverse borough, where 70% of our young Black boys are disproportionately stopped as a result of stop and search, where a significant proportion of Black Afro-Caribbean children are failing when it comes to GCSE and education, where a significant number of our children go to university, but they're graduates with no jobs. So how is it that as organizations like myself, local government, connecting with the wider communities, anchor institutions that are in our boroughs, be it the Amazons, be it whoever it is, Tesla, whoever it is, Pret, how are we able to pull them around the table and say to them, well, look, Hackney's made a commitment to be an anti-racist borough. What are you doing? What are how are we holding them accountable when they're placed in our boroughs? And it's not just for Hackney, we can't change the world, but if it's replicated across local government, then it's a great movement that's been created in terms of allyship. And, we don't have to, it doesn't always have to be the big things, it can be the small things as well. But I really do believe that it's recognizing that all of us have a part to play in creating the change that we want to see. And all of us have a part to play in terms of challenging as well. But those of us that have the opportunity to have the voices and can create the change, we really need to step up to the table and making sure that we're doing so. And not be apologetic for doing so either. Because, I really feel some people say, oh, well, it's career defining. Well, if it's career defining, unfortunately, so it will be. But we've got to be proud, and we've got to be, if we think about the theme for Black History 2025, power and pride. We've got to have pride in who we are as a people. We've got to use the power that we have, and we all have a sense of power individually, but collectively, it's so much greater than when we stand on our own. So allyship is a really fantastic question, a really important tool that we need to use and to utilize in a time like this. There's a lady very quickly called Jenny Garrett. She wrote a book and it speaks about the fight for equity versus equality. And it's amazing what she says, because she says, yes, equality is right, but it's not equality that we need. We actually need equity in the system, because everybody's circumstances in coming to the table is different. If there's equity, that means that we all have a similar chance at being able to succeed. And so, and I think that she speaks about that in great detail. And it's how do we educate ourselves? How do we inform ourselves on what are the things that we need to employ in order to create the change? But allyship is excellent and needs to be utilized.
Yeah, you kind of go on to my next question, which I'll continue with yourself, but can we because I want to get some Q&A, and so if we could all be a bit quicker in this, but what is the future for Black inclusion within the UK? What barriers do we face, and how can we overcome them? I'm going to go straight to yourself, Dawn, and then we're going to put that, but quite quick answers on this one, because I do want to go to Q&A.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I'll say it from the get-go. I still think that there's a glass ceiling in the UK when it comes to Black people getting into senior positions and just progressing up the ladder. And it takes somebody in an organization who's willing to say, well, look, you know, we need to have this whole thing around equity. We can't just, there's got to be a level playing field. We've got to create the policies. We've got to create the change to enable people who are, you know, it's Black History season. So let's talk about what can we do to create the opportunities for more Black young people to come through the system, and enabling them, because it's not about giving anyone something on a plate. Because Yvonne, I'm sure that when you started, you literally you were fighting against the odds, but she had a drive and she had a purpose, and so many of our young people do. So how can we equip them and empower them to say, even against all of the odds and the challenges and everything that there is, even if there is a glass ceiling, what are the hammers that we can give them in effect to break those glass ceilings down? And so many of us, there are so many more of Black professionals now who can do that in banking, or right across all of the fields that we have professionals in. So how can we, as again talking about that point around allyship, collectively create a system that enables and empowers our young people to see that they are part of this system and can create change and can make a difference and can benefit from what's happening.
Yeah, so thank you. Sorry, and that's a great answer. So yourself to Yvonne, because we've got 3 minutes to answer from everybody, and then I want to go because we've got lots of questions in the Q&A. So I do want some of the questions answered.
I think very much along the same line as Dawn. My only thing is, I'll be a little bit controversial here, that you know, back in the old days, during my generation, we didn't have mentors, we didn't have sponsors, we didn't have all this help around, but we still made it through. So my appeal to the young people would say, yes, use the help where you can, but please look within yourself, use your own resilience, use your own contacts, use everything you've got in there, dig deep, and in the end it'll work for you. But don't rely on others. Don't rely on others. That's it.
I think that's great advice. Yeah, I love that. Don't rely on others. You've got to, you know, try and change the narrative yourself and get people on board with too, and you can do a lot. Thank you, Josh, and then Caroline.
All right, I'm going to come with a bit of a more somber outlook on it. I'll be as quick as I can. Yvonne mentioned resilience, and Dawn spoke about the glass ceiling. And we're seeing a generation of Black professionals, educators, and entrepreneurs who are completely redefining what Black excellence looks like, right? I think the UK and like Black inclusion in the UK could go on to be something truly fantastic. But my fear and my worry for the UK is that, quite simply, the young generation no longer feel like they need to make that. And I'll make my point. Yes, everyone, I was born and raised, I'm proud of being British. I was born and raised in Brixton. I no longer live in the UK. I live in the UAE now. And the question you're going to start getting a lot more is, why am I fighting this fight when there are plenty of other countries who appreciate my skills, who reward me for what I do, and not feel like I still need to have that fight? You know, there are countries where when my wife goes to hospital, I do not need to worry that, you know, and think about her being 5 times more likely to experience a miscarriage or a stillbirth. So whilst I am quietly optimistic about the UK's chances if they take heed and listen, I am quite concerned because it's not like the Windrush generation where they couldn't go back home, right? Our skilled Black professionals have an abundance of options available to them, and it seems like the UK has lost the thing that attracted my parents to the country, which is hope. They came because they had the hope that the streets were paved with gold and they can make something really meaningful for their families. I think the UK is on the verge of losing that if they don't buck up their ideas and really, really, as Caroline said, come together and, you know, find solutions to the problems.
Thank you. And Caroline?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Josh, Yvonne, and Dawn have said. It's about collectively standing firmer, speaking louder, and pushing harder. And I think I've learned that focus really makes things happen. I had the privilege of being involved in the 10,000 Black Interns initiative. And that was to obviously get paid internships and apprenticeships in business for at least 6 weeks. And I saw the difference that made to the individuals, but also to the business. And they've achieved, it was set up by a UK charity, and they've achieved their goal of getting 10,000 Black interns in business who are grads or students in business. This year they achieved that initiative, and they're now expanding it out into 35 sectors. So I think deliberate focuses on changing the bias that still exists in the corporate world is really important too, because I've seen that make a meaningful difference.
Yeah, and I'm going to say from my point of view, obviously I know a lot of companies that want to make a difference myself as well. And although we see a lot of hate on social media, I still see a lot of companies that want diverse people to work for them, and actually still, there's a lot that have pulled off. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, but there's still a good proportion of organizations that still value people from diverse backgrounds. Are we there with equity there, like Yvonne says? Absolutely not. And Dawn, sorry, we need equity a lot more, but I still think there's a lot of people in the UK that will have us back, but are just getting drowned out by social media as well. That's my personal point of view. I'm not saying there's a huge wave of people that are being really, really loud, but we can't give up hope. We've got to keep moving forward, and we've got to sit there and fight. Not literally fight, but fight for existence. Do you know what I mean? And fight for what's right. So I've got some questions from the audience, and thank you so much for all your answers on that. It's been absolutely sensational. But we've got a question from Christiane. Excuse me if I say your name wrong, but do you think there's a need to be more training for teachers so that they are more likely to teach Black history? Is an LGBTQA. I know when I talk to people, they have a fear of speaking out for LGBTQA people issues because they have a fear of getting it wrong. Is that a fear? Is that a genuine thing? Like, do people have a fear of getting it wrong, and that's why they don't speak up? Who would like to answer that?
Oh, sorry, I interjected there. Look, I don't know. I think the problem is there's a lot that happens around teaching Black history and LGBTQ history. Believe it or not, the Schools History Project are a organization that really push this quite heavily. I don't know. I think fear may be one thing, but I think it stems from people sticking to their areas of expertise. I think for teachers who were educated 10-20 years ago, they were educated in a particular way, and so that's easier. But I do need to have a big shout out to my previous school, Parkview, because all of the things you're mentioning, all the topics, they teach that, and a lot more schools in London anyway teach those kind of history. So yeah. I think there's quite a lot of training there. Teachers just need to.
But we need to deliver. Josh, we need more Black teachers as well, because they're so underrepresented as well. It'd be nice to see a lot more Black teachers. I live in Liverpool. I think there's probably 2 Black teachers in the whole of Liverpool, which is just not enough. But yeah, so we need the history, but we also need to see the representation.
Can I come in quickly? So just on the back of that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think so. To answer that question a little bit more wider as well, there's the way in which Black and the way in which subjects are taught about Black people as well. So if I think about somebody who's doing midwifery, and I mentioned that because Josh referred to it, I spoke to a friend of my daughter's who's just finished her course on midwifery, and what she said, one of the things they're taught about is that Black women have a higher pain threshold than your average white or other people. And so therefore, it's not surprising that we see the statistics that we see around what's happening to Black women when they go into maternity wards. The same thing with police training. There's a certain stereotypical way in which, and bias that's taught in when you're speaking about people from Black and even global majority backgrounds. So the thing around teaching and education is it's so much more wider than what's taught in the classrooms for our young people. It then permeates all kind of educational, professional, institutions, as it were, and that's what's the problem, because it doesn't just create a lack of training within schools, a lack of education within schools for our young people, but it goes beyond those walls as well.
Okay, thank you. On to the next question. We've got 4 minutes, so I'm going to try and get through. So a quick fire. So I love this one. What advice would you give to someone this is from Kemi, by the way, trying to balance cultural pride with professional expectations in predominantly white spaces? What advice would you give to someone trying to balance cultural pride with professional expectations in predominantly white spaces? Does anybody want to answer this one very quickly?
I think it's a difficult one. I mean, being an entrepreneur, I'm not, in the corporate space all the time, but I think for me, I would say culture comes before your corporate life, because it's important for you to be yourself, know your history, be proud, all of those things, because corporate, you're going to leave the corporate. And if you're all about the corporate, when you leave that corporate, who are you?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. It's about being able to feel confident enough to bring your whole self to whatever situation you find yourself in. So be it at work, be it you're walking, we should be able to, where they say World Afro Day, you should be able to feel proud to who you are, feeling proud in your skin. And that's something, again, that we need to teach all of our young people, to feel proud as to who they are, not to, and that our culture is ever so important.
Exactly. And the last question, just 1 second. There's lots of questions there. I'm just trying to read out this one. Where do you see the DEI landscape going in the UK?
Well, if reform have their way, we'll all have to stop. Well, in local government, it's said that we'll all have to kind of throw those DEI initiatives away. But I seriously, I don't think that it will go away. I think because there's so much investment that is being put into DEI, and we are all. I can only speak from a local government perspective right now, but what I see around me is that there's so much passion for it, and people, know that it's necessary.
I'm so sorry, my internet went off there.
Yeah, you froze for a while.
I did froze for a while. Listen, it lasted to the end. Listen, we've got 2 minutes, so I want to save on a positive, and I want you to say any last words that you feel that is relevant for today. A little sentence of people keep going, or encouragement, or whatever that may be. Who wants to go first?
Sorry, Paul, can I just add to what Dawn was saying? So DNI is not going away because there's this wonderful population called Gen Zs, and they are a very different cohort of individuals. They're also the future leaders of the world and of business. And we've done a lot of work on this at Kantar, but they believe that DE&I is not just important on occasional things, but every single day on everything they consider. So more fools to the businesses and any organizations that's not embracing D&I, because to Yvonne's point earlier, if you're just a tick box, you're not going to get the people who will make a meaningful difference. So the Gen Z cohort, over 80% of them feel it's very important for anything they get involved in, whether it's brands, organizations, day-to-day activities. DE&I is a key consideration for them. It's very different to the previous cohorts. And I think, Josh, you mentioned before, we have 5 generations in the workplace now. This group are going to change the dynamic.
I agree with you.
I completely agree. So sometimes you've got to hit rock bottom and you'll bounce right back up. That's exactly what we'll do. So let's have one word from everybody, or a sentence from everybody about this session and a word of encouragement.
Well, I think it's been a fantastic session. I think you've got a great group of people with lots of different approaches and thoughts about it, but in the end we all come together, and that's what matters. We've got to be together for the future. So thank you very much, Paul, for all your hard work. And thanks for everyone that joined in and put lots of comments in the box as well.
Thank you, Yvonne. It's a pleasure to have you on board. And Caroline?
Yes, what she said. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. It's been really inspiring. I've learned so much, Josh. Please send me your information that you presented. It's just, it's so powerful and inspiring. But we're better together, and we are what we accept. So we need to hold ourselves accountable for being, living our lives and making a meaningful difference.
And we're better together. I love that. Thank you, Caroline. We are definitely better together. What an amazing... sorry, just very quickly. When I do the NDAs, we have National Diversity Awards. We have people from every background in that cathedral, LGBTQ plus, race, disabilities, different religion, everybody. And everybody gets on. And everybody's there because they're just amazing. And that's how society should be for me. Josh?
Yeah, first of all, echo the thoughts that Yvonne, Dawn, and Caroline has mentioned, yourself as well, Paul. I think it's been a fantastic discussion, very informative. I've learned a lot from everyone on the panel, and I think I'll end it like this. In a war, there are many battles, and in a war of attrition, you don't always win the battles, but you win the war. And I believe that we will eventually win this war against all forms of discrimination, hate, and anything that tears us apart. So yeah, I'm still in the battle, even though I'm over here, and I believe we win the war.
Thank you. I know we've been over time, but Dawn.
Well, do you know what? I'm just going to say ditto to what Josh has said. Amazing. I think yeah. I absolutely agree with what my fellow panelists have said, Yvonne and Caroline. Everyone's a trailblazer. Everyone, is doing something in order to try and make sure that this topic doesn't go away. So let's celebrate Black History 365. Black History season is what I would say. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm going to leave you with this little story. Again, I was fostered. I had no parents. I had nobody that believed in me. And I've managed to achieve and make changes to so many organizations, so many people's lives in the community. And I'm just one person. And if I can do it, so can you as well. We've highlighted lots of people across the UK. We can be that change you want to see. And that's what I'll say. Be the change you want to see. If we want to see change, you have to shout about it. And you have to stand up for yourself and make sure that change happens. So on behalf of myself and the panel and everybody from Inclusive Companies and all my team as well that put this together in the background, I want to thank you all for joining us today. You've all been phenomenal. I've learned so much. The panel's been absolutely amazing, and we'll have to do it again very soon, because I feel like this is just so powerful that I want to continue the conversation. So thank you on behalf of Inclusive Companies and everybody here. Thank you so much, and we shall see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.